start a project like this, I often have a very specific idea on what I want it to be when it's done. This project, unfortunately, didn't want to have anything to do with my vision, and sometimes the hardest part of doing a project like this is letting go of what you want and let it be what it is. As I finish rounding this blank off, let's go back in time and take a look at where this project began. So if you look at this piece of wood we're starting with, it has lots of fun burls on the sides, but it also has a bunch of cracks, which is why a friend of mine gave it to me, because he couldn't use it. I'm filling this with clear resin right now, and because it's clear, it's unforgiving. Any bubble will show up and it'll look really, really bad. So I'm going to use a vacuum chamber to pull all the gas out of this the best I can before I put it over into the pressure pot. It is kind of fun to watch the vacuum chamber suck the air out of this. As soon as the bubbles stop, we'll go over to the pressure pot. Back over at the lathe, I'm flattening the bottom off so I can make a tenon and flip the blank around. Here I make an unforced error. I make that nice line to show me how far down to go, but right there, I took it too far. This is going to come back and bite me later. Now I'm trying to create a rough shape of what I want the outside to look like. I'm also trying to dig down into the resin to get to the point where I'm exposing the burls. My goal with this project is to have the burls on the top, the burls on the bottom, but the log in the middle to be gone. So I'm going to hollow this out later. The shaping I'm doing right now is just so I can see how far in I have to go when I'm hollowing. With the top all shaped the way I want it, I've moved on to the bottom, and you're starting to see how pretty the burls are going to be in this piece. The next step will be hollowing the vessel, but before I do that, I want to be able to see through it, so I'm putting resin on the outside. Since my goal is to be able to remove the log completely from the center, I want to be able to see through the piece to make sure I've accomplished that. However, being able to see through it right now shows me that a key piece of my design didn't come through as I planned. You see, I waited a little bit after I put the resin in the pressure pot, let it cure and get thick. And before it was hard, I mixed a small batch of black resin and I pushed it down into the thicker resin with a popsicle stick. I had hoped this would add wisps of black resin throughout the vessel, but they weren't nearly as prominent as I had hoped for. This part's a little embarrassing. I couldn't figure out why my Forstner bit wouldn't dig into the wood. Then I realized the lathe was spinning backwards. Using the Forstner bit like this removes a lot of material fast, saving time when I hollow. It also lets me measure how deep I want it to be exactly. Remember when I said the tenon was a little bit too small? I thought it had a good grip, but clearly it didn't. This isn't a problem though, we can fix it. We'll just go add a screw to the center of the chuck and put it into the piece. That'll work. Back in business. Turning again, everything's going great. Okay, so clearly that didn't work either. I'm going to have to go back and put this on a smaller chuck. Now we're in business. We got a nice secure hold on the piece as it turns. As I get deeper and deeper into the piece, you'll start to see white. That is the wood disappearing and the resin becoming the wall. Now everything's hollowed and it's time to start this journey of finishing. I was trying to figure out ways to finish the inside, so I sanded it and then I poured some tabletop resin in there, and it takes about 8 hours to cure. And my idea was that it would sit upside down overnight and it would all drain out and level off. It didn't work. So attempt number 2, back to the slow turner, which is sped up quite a bit here, and the thin UV resin that I typically use for finishes. This looked okay on the outside, but the inside still didn't have the look I was looking for, so I sanded it off. So in this finishing quest, I decided to put it back on the lathe and just polish the crap out of it. I polished for so long, but I'm really, really happy with the way the outside turned out at least. With that problem solved, it's time to get out the vacuum chuck and turn the bottom of the vessel.
Wow!
I really like removing the tenon from a piece. It's that moment that you're almost done. But it's also a little nerve-wracking because if it comes off now, all that hard work's gone. So I'm really careful, keeping the speed slow, and slowly just inching away at the surface I want. Here I'm going to get the parting tool out and just cut that little nib off. And this is always so satisfying for me, when that comes free like that. It almost doesn't look real. Now that the tenon is off of the piece, we'll sand the bottom a bit, jump over to the laser, create a maker's mark, and put finish on the bottom, and we will be done. I'm feeling pretty good. Gluing the maker's mark in place, gonna put some finish down, and for some reason, which you'll see later in the close-up shots, the finish discolored the metal some. I tried to sand the metal down, it just made it worse. I figured it's the bottom of the bowl, but I was still a little sad about that. Normally, this is when I'd say it's time for the close-up shots, but there was still something bothering me about this bowl. Off camera, I experimented with some 400 grit sandpaper to try to frost the interior finish, and I loved it. So I realized I should film it, and this is me sanding the inside of the bowl. And with that, we're done. Thank you so much for watching, and here are your close-ups.